So we now have our second panel session of the conference, which is going to feature Kylie Steele from South Coast Bushfire Consultants, Stephen Kipp from Skip Consulting, Colin Wood from Shoalhaven City Council, newly retired Shoalhaven City Council, David Henderson from James Cook University Cyclone Testing Station, who's joining us virtually, I hope, and Kate Cotter from Resilient Building Australia, who is also joining us virtually, and they'll be discussing multi-hazard and energy-efficient resilience rating and assessor training program. Take it away. I believe. Oh, we need. All right.
We'll wait a little while for these people to get set up. And while they do, I'll just ad lib here for a bit. Kate rang in sick this morning, so she said, can I stand in for her? And I said, yeah, that's fine. I want to just give you a little bit of history as to how we got here. And following the 2019 and 2020 bushfires, after that event, we were devastated down in the Shoalhaven. And it was Kate who reached out to us, and she said, would we be interested in participating in a Fortis house design? And we said, yes, we would love to do that. And it was a community-led project. Little did we know that Fortis house would end up not just being one for bushfire, but was also important for flood, for cyclone, and for heat shock. And it's also energy efficient. And that design was released last year. And I'm really, really pleased that the last council meeting that I attended last week, the council agreed to find a block of land and we will build a Fortis house. And what we're going to do is we're going to open that up and let people come in and feel it, walk through it, and experience what the community did in designing that home. But that was only part of the story. Because the other part of the story is that I was really concerned, being the manager of certification and compliance down at Shoalhaven, what do we do with the existing building stock? And when I was going out and talking to the community would say, okay, I was lucky this time, but what can I do to improve myself? So I started a survey, and many of you would be aware that in Conjola Park, we lost 47% of the houses in that little subdivision. But of the 53%, I inspected every building. And I took notes about what the issues were. And it probably doesn't surprise you that there were ember attack issues. There were window and door solutions that needed to be addressed. There were timber decks everywhere. And of course, there was landscaping problems. And I noted all this down, and then I shared that with BBCA, which is the Bushfire Building Council of Australia, and they didn't let it go, and that was really good. They've since changed their name to the Resilient Building Council, and that's what we're here today for. But what they did was they introduced me to Jeff Emerson, and what Jeff did was he took our I-Auditor program that we developed to go in and ground truth that bushfire, and he made it better. He made it so much better for bushfires. And he developed that to a point where he could go through an existing home, and we went through a couple of homes in Sussex Inlet, where I live, down there, and we were able to go through and work out what the problems were with that particular building. And then we could go back and say, well, if you did this, this and this, you could improve it. And it was from there that we got this app idea. The development of this bushfire app, like Fortis, has progressed. And it's not just looking at bushfire, it's looking at other components like flooding, cyclone, heat shock or heat stress. And this is going to be something that's really, really important, particularly as I'm ageing. It's about the heat that can impact onto a building, and we can have 45-degree days 7 or 8 days in a row, and you have to be inside your building. And if we have a power failure, then you have to be inside a building that can sustain that, or we're going to see a lot of deaths in that area. So this is really, really important, this heat shock. And of course, we've got energy efficiency. So now we have what's called the Multi-Hazard Rating Project, which is where we're at today. It was co-funded by New South Wales Government, so I'm really, really happy and thankful for that. And also the Federal Government National Emergency Management Agency. So they've co-funded it, but it's in partnership with the Insurance Council. because the Insurance Council are looking at this to say, well, what can they do as far as reducing the impact onto our insurance premiums? Now, we're not far here from the Hawkesbury district, and I have a lot of family in the Hawkesbury district, and their annual insurance just for flooding is $35,000 a year. You can't afford that. So we need to look a little bit more laterally, and that's where we're hoping this will go. We also have the Victorian and Queensland governments coming on board to support this. So this is a really exciting time. So that gives you the background for it, and I'm really hoping that I can introduce David Henderson online. Hopefully, otherwise it's going to be a very quick talk. And David is from the James Cook University, and he's with the Cyclone Testing Station. So I'll pass over to David for a brief presentation.
Hi, Colin. I don't know if you can hear me or not.
No? Yes, I can. Sorry. Yeah.
Hey, there you are. Can you see the slides on screen at all?
Yep, you're good to go.
Oh, Jesus. All right. Excellent. Technology works. Look, thanks very much for that. And thank you for laying out all the different components to this huge program. I'm just going to be talking a little bit about the cyclone or storm component. So it's not just on cyclones, it's also on storm. And really, it's a similar process across all the different hazards. I think Alan might be talking about the energy and heat aspects as well after me. But really, across whatever the component of the rating system that they're looking at, it's really trying to understand the drivers or the drivers of damage in terms of the natural hazards that are impacting it. So it's really the environment, the surrounds, the materials, and how we put all those materials together in terms of the building systems and working out what's really causing us the grief. So in terms of wind damage, storm damage, Cyclone Tracy may have had a massive impact on our building codes and standards for the devastation that it caused, and it made some really huge changes across our domestic construction, which led to there's houses before the 80s, houses after the 80s that are quite different in the way that they're designed. The one thing that it did lead to was really in changing the National Construction Code, especially in terms of domestic construction for our wind loads, in that it's a focus on life safety in terms of make sure that if we're designing something that it doesn't come down on top of us for the design criteria or it doesn't go and hit somebody else. It's really around the robustness of that design. And in terms of our pre-code housing, the housing that was built before those massive changes came in, in our current damage surveys, we still see damage to this construction. There is a lot of retrofitting ideas out there that we can make these houses stronger, but currently as they stand, there's a real issue in terms of them. For modern construction, this is a photo, the top photo is taken from Cyclone Yazi in Mission Beach, one of the main impact zones. All of that modern suburb, you can see there's a couple of tarps on the roofs scattered through. The vast majority performed well, did their job, protected the occupants inside. So that's great in terms of life safety. The lower photo is a storm tide zone, less of an issue, less of successful in terms of that, but storm tide is a different issue again with it in terms of cyclones. But one of the things that you're not seeing from those photos of the ones from the wind is that we're getting a lot of rain coming into our buildings during storms. And it's a real driver of damage. It's also increasing insurance payouts. And it's really making a social disconnect because we can't live in these houses afterwards. It's taking 12 months, 18 months, 2 years to repair the damage to the internals of these houses from so much water coming in through it. So that really brings us to going beyond the National Construction Code in terms of life safety, but really thinking about resilience and functionality. So we've got to try to come up with ways of going beyond the bare minimum of our structural standards or building code and coming up with better ways to engage with the community in terms of wanting to have more, wanting to do better than the bare minimum to reduce these types of damage and disconnect within the community. In terms of the behavioural science research done with the different units, that it's not just around a driver of loss in financial terms of like a premium for your insurance, or it's an understanding of the consequence that the homeowner really has. It's the understanding of what their risk to it. And there's other aspects around those social drivers. If it's a simple factor, a simple way of presenting the information in a linear form, they're more likely to engage with resilience or engage with mitigation, engage with retrofitting, and really take that on board. Another cute one that was really there, it's you're more likely to do retrofitting or mitigation if your neighbours have done it. So again, propagating it out across the community does really help across the whole. So really to build beyond the minimum, to get to raise the importance of maintenance to existing homes, raise the importance of mitigations, raise the idea of going beyond our basic design. The resilience rating is a way of really engaging with people and communicating that across, like the energy efficiency or safety ratings for cars, really promoting that type of logic. So it's a very straightforward process, but a quite detailed one inside it, in that the really neat thing of looking at the multi-hazard component to it, that in the collection phase of the survey, there's so many common questions and features right across, whether it be under attack or wind-driven water, rain from a storm, or whether what type of seals or heights or everything, or the surrounds for flood. All these common details come into the question set and then can get parsed out through the different rating modules. Those different rating modules are not just a simple question and answer, but they really look at the probabilities of the type of damage depending on the feature. Say, if we've got a complex metal roof and we're looking at a storm type damage with valley gutters or box gutters, that gives certain levels of vulnerability depending on the maintenance and the design of that, the shape and slope of the roof. But it's also that if you've got plasterboard ceilings or there's no overflows in that gutter, all these other questions link in to coming up with the resilience rating, different recommendations for it. So there can be multiple questions feeding into different types of answers right across all those different checklists with it. This has been used in other ones. We do know it's successful in the process for the wind and the rain component that's been combined into the multi-hazard one. There's a system that we've been using up here in the north for strata tile inspection. It comes up with a resilience rating for the body corporate to really understand about how to improve the resilience and functionality of their buildings, and it comes up with a rating metric for it. A lot of feedback's gone in terms of the reporting and the score system and how it's been used by both the body corporate and by the insurance industry to come up with better systems for it. Thanks, Colin.
Well, that brings us to the end of the formal presentation. We thought that it would be really important for you to ask some questions and go to that next level to see what we want to get out of this program. So, do we have any questions? There's one.
I was just wondering, because with the bushfire, the landscaping, what we call the asset protection zone in New South Wales, it's important, but it probably doesn't aspects. Is that part of the program?
Yeah, I can do that one. Yes, Kate, it is. It's part of the bushfire assessment does a BAL assessment. So when they go through that, they work out the impacting vegetation that's coming on to that building and what the building's BAL would be. So once they work out the BAL, then the computer program goes into the BAL requirements for that particular building. And say it's BAL 29, then it'll go through the requirements for, posts and floors and walls and windows and doors and the roof system. So it does all of that, but it works it out on the BAL. So the very first step is the BAL, just like the way we deal with it in a bushfire consulting term. Yes, Debbie.
When you're actually going through the systems with the BAL components, I think sometimes for mum and dads, non-builders or certifiers, it's sometimes hard to understand what those components mean for them. So does the program kind of explain those performance requirements in English, in mum and dad language?
Yeah, I understand what you're saying. Yeah, that was one of the things that Jeff was going through when he developed that component of it. And what he wanted was explanation boxes that you could go out to get some additional information, because let's face it, it will be, I think it's going to be taken up really well by our bushfire consultants and our councils and planners and building surveyors, but it'll also be taken up by homeowners. So it was really important that while we have that knowledge as to what those basic concepts are, we need to be able to explain it to them. And in plain English, Deb, that's exactly what we need to do. Well, I have a question here for Alan. What do you think the benefits of an integrated single home assessment for multi-hazard resilience and energy efficiency?
So I think I touched on this a little bit in my presentation earlier today. Upfront, I guess there's practical benefits in terms of less imposition on the homeowner with a single assessment and single site visit. There's less cost for whoever's funding the assessment because it's a single site assessment. But then when analysing the data and providing the recommendations, there's also, you can avoid possible adverse effects where you might be specifying, again, like I said earlier today, for example, insulation that isn't suitable for the bushfire zone. But there's also co-benefits. So when you start to look at those two aims of energy efficiency and disaster resilience, the cost-benefit picture could shift, and it could suddenly become very beneficial to and make sense to replace your windows because you can get dual benefits of having double glazing and toughened glass, for example. So by having that holistic approach, you get all of those benefits and avoid the adverse effects.
Oh, good. So there are some crossovers between each of the disciplines that we're talking about?
Yeah, so in the pilot project, we looked at just bushfire and energy efficiency, and I think we had a table of about 5 pages of different crossovers. So there's quite a lot of detail when you start to try to combine the two things.
Yeah, thank you for that. Kylie, how can the audience get involved in this program?
There's a couple of different ways that the audience can get involved. I wasn't actually here in the session when everyone put their hands up as to who they were and where they came from, but my understanding is that there's a lot of consultants in the room. So the Resilient Building Council is developing a training program so that BPAD assessors can do the online training so that they're skilled and they understand how to assess a home from all the different components of resilience. So that's probably one way that consultants can get involved. So, we recommend you get onto our website, the Resilient Building Council website, and register your interest, and then we'll keep you informed of how that training program's being developed. I think secondly, for anyone in the room or anyone who's listening that's involved, in any of the emergency services or from local government, there's a role here with these resilience ratings to help you educate your community, whether it's, through any of your community education processes. And, this is going to be linked into hopefully some grants so that, we can help connect people with grants through local government and the emergency services, or the community education programs. So hopefully that sort of, addresses most of the people in the room and how they can get involved.
Yeah, thank you for that. Well, one thing from me is that I'm not really computer literate. Will there be a program out and running that I can go to? And you can show me how to do it, like 101 for Colin, sort of thing? You're going to really dumb it down for me.
Look, I think that there's going to be a number of different platforms developed depending on who you are and what you want to get out of the program. So for assessors, it'll be a more complex methodology, more complex, probably more detailed, education tool. For you, Colin, if you're not,
Oh, definitely not, I can tell you that.
So for the community, for example, we could have sessions or we could show you how to download the app. And then, you know, that's a very simple tool with lots of pictorials, and I'm sure you'd be able to manage it.
As long as it's got pictures, I'll be right.
You just said pictures weren't good.
I think if we talk about community resilience, and that's what we spoke about yesterday afternoon, so Stephen, to you, how will this improve community resilience, do you think, this app?
Yeah, we talked yesterday about building resilience versus community resilience. It's a fascinating topic, isn't it? And I know Alan's presentation touched on this as well. So this is traditionally, insurers and governments have been in separate silos. So insurers have relied on government regulation to set minimum standards for them to base their policies on. But climate change more generally, but bushfire specifically, has created this divide for the first time in my working life around this issue. So we're hoping that this program will end up giving insurers a reasonable way of rating a whole community as opposed to individual properties, because we talked about that. If you've got the best house in the street, it doesn't really help you that much necessarily. It's actually the worst house in the street that creates the risk. So, for example, if you apply for an insurance policy for your home, just generally, the first question they'll ask you is, what's the postcode? And that postcode will determine your premium at some level. Then they'll come into detail about, do you have deadlocks or a security system? So we're hoping the insurers will come back in line with government regulation, because that difference between building life safety, in fact, protecting your family as opposed to protecting your family's assets, is where that divide has occurred. And we're hoping to bring the insurers back in. And again, over the last 2 days, we've had a lot of discussion around insurance, but what we're looking for is a more fair assessment of what the insurance risk is, so that people pay a proportionate price for the risk they've got, and no more and no less. And so far, the feedback we've had with insurance meetings has been really positive, because insurers want to stay in the market, but if there's risk in the market that they can't define, they will charge a premium to reflect the worst case for them. And that's what I think you're seeing when you describe the Hawkesbury River issues.
Yeah. And I think it's important to realise too that the Insurance Council are part of the partnership that we're dealing with here. So Kate and the team have been I'm only on the periphery of this, but Kate and the team have certainly been active in that space. So we're in probably a dodgy postcode, you'd say, here in Katoomba, maybe. 2780 would probably be the bushfire mecca of the world. Are we likely to see reductions, do you think, in our premiums?
This is the elephant in the room. So I think it's unrealistic to see reductions in insurance premiums based on any issue that has a climate change component to it. Because the reality is the risk is getting greater and insurers have to make a living. The question is whether the increase is proportional or not. So what we're seeing is in flood areas, insurance costs going up by an order of magnitude 5 or 10 times, which makes it all of a sudden unaffordable and puts homeowners with mortgages particularly under enormous financial pressure. Again, all the feedback we've had with the insurance groups is that they want to see a fair competitive market so they can price competitively with their opposing companies. And we're hoping this tool will at least give them that advantage, because most insurers need to be in the business of providing insurance policies, and they don't not want to provide a policy. We were talking last night over one of these issues. The way I like to think of it is that in Victoria and presumably New South Wales it's the same. If you get a learner's permit, one of the questions they ask you is, what's the probability of a red P plate driver having a reportable accident in the first 12 months? And the answer is 85%. How's that for scary figures? So if you apply for a policy for your child to drive a car, the premium will be about 90% of the value of the car, because there's an 85% chance the car will be written off in that time. But insurers provide products in that space because they don't want to lose the business of the parents.
Yeah.
So again, I don't think insurers will just dump the Blue Mountains. They'll be looking at the overall Sydney market, for example, and that's a market that has a global effect, and there'll be a premium adjustment for these areas, but they won't leave the market altogether.
Yeah.
Because we have to be realistic. In a climate change world, there are times when insurers leave the market altogether. I'm seeing that in engineering insurance at the moment.
Yeah,
The number of insurers
most
is
definitely.
dropping to 1 or 2 players.
Thank you for that. One for you, David. How are the ratings different to the existing building standards that we have? Oh, yeah, still.
Okay. I can only speak on the storm component column, and that the ratings are really looking at these different performance criteria, so well beyond what the basic life safety is in terms of whether your roof stays on or not for a design load. There's a lot of aspects in terms of the resilience that we can look at to try to stop wind and rain getting into it, debris breaching the building envelope. And as Alan mentioned, the common things around energy efficiency and the bushfire component is also around ember attack and keeping the water out, like similar ceiling systems or shutter systems or mesh screens to stop windows getting broken from debris, to stop the pressure coming in, to stop the rain coming in, also works for these other elements as well as also theft and whatever else. So there's all these different components that really sit in there that are outside what the bare building national construction code is. And this links into other aspects to help reduce the risk or the consequence of damage, means you can stay in your house after an event. The house is easy to get back to functional again, keeps the community together as opposed to dislocation and having to relocate around those aspects to it. So a lot of things beyond what the bare building code gives us.
That's so it actually goes a little bit further, is what I'm hearing from that. Yes.
I guess my question is, so this could be an app, it could be a computer, so you plug in numbers on a computer, but I'm trying to wrap my head around it. This is like more retrofit, but what about new houses? How does that work with our planning system where we got the basics, we got the bushfire assessment, we got, you know, all of the different assessment, and they just look at their own.
Yeah, so this one will be on a phone, so you'll be able to it's mobile for you, so you'll be able to use that on site. But when you're looking at the other ones and it's a brand new build, you could probably use this and run it through to give you a rating, so there's no dramas with that. But you have different tools there where you've got to comply with the current standards, so you'll go down a different pathway. One more? Yes?
Hi, sorry, I've got two questions as usual. First one is...
No, you're only allowed one.
All right, I have to prioritise. Anyway, as a flame zone rated homeowner, how could I get involved, or how could homeowners get involved in this program, is my first question.
Let's go. Kylie, can you do that one?
Yeah, so I guess it doesn't really matter what rating, like what Bell rating your house has, whether it's flame zone or Bell 12.5. You know, everyone can get involved. If you're a flame zone house, then your resilience rating, you know, you're going to need to do a significant amount of things potentially to get a resilience rating. You know, the truth of the matter is there's probably some places within Australia where you're unlikely to get into the best practice realm, you know, if you've got a house that's, you know, less than 10 metres from, you know, large areas of forest. You know, you just have a significant risk there. But there are definitely things that will be recommended through the Bushfire Resilience to improve your resilience.
I think you're missing my question. I'm looking to contribute to this program from a homeowner perspective. Is there, you know, the whole lot of, you're all professional practitioners.
Yep.
I'm on the receiving end and wanting to apply my experience or contribute as a user with dirty questions. How can I do that?
Yeah, so you can download, download the app in October when it comes out and fiddle with it and look at what your base building design is. But I wanted to come back to the start of your question. So you've got a house in an area designated as flame zone.
Yep.
So this is the dilemma. This is the confusion for insurers. So the concept of flame zone is in the building code for new buildings, and your house was built before that came in, and there is no retrospective law for that. So we're misusing the language here.
Okay, that's my error. What I'm saying is I'm doing a renovation extension. The structure itself has been deemed to be in a flame zone, to be Bell flame zone rated. There's a whole bunch of things that is recommended for me to do. I'm trying to work out how can I apply best practice across however many aspects of resilience to achieve that, and therefore, from my experience, contributing to the practicalities of the suggestions you guys are coming up with.
Exactly. So I think we got to the same question, having discussed that. I think I can add to the question before. So depending on how old your house is, talk about energy ratings as a comparison. Depending on how old your house is, it's got a 0-star rating or a 3, 4, 5, 6 or now 7-star rating under the current building code. It'll depend. The app allows you to assess what your house actually is, because even if it was built to a 3-star rating, it has aged and some of those factors will have changed. And then you can look at what the actual star rating is in terms of bushfire, and then how far it's possible to practically upgrade that building. And what Kylie's saying is, in flame zone, that degree of practicality might be quite narrow for a whole range of reasons. And in the examples David's got, in cyclonic areas, for example, insurers have walked away from asbestos cement sheet clad housing and insurability, not because of the life safety risk, but because if they blow over, the cleanup cost on the policy is exorbitant. They're just saying they won't insure those buildings anymore. So flame zone buildings that are 100-year-old houses in areas that are now flame zone are going to be problematic, but the app will let you work out exactly what that degree of impracticality is. And we'd be very keen for people like you to try it and give us feedback on that.
While I still have the mic until they turn me off.
Until they steal it from you.
Yesterday, the Handbook 208 was raised, the Bushfire Resilience Rating Act was raised, and now the Multi-Hazard and Energy Efficiency Resilience Rating Initiative has been raised. They're obviously all related. How much are you guys leveraging off and coordinating the initiatives to minimise duplication of effort and maximise the integration potential?
We're all the same people. Yeah. Now, I do have to wrap it up there, but there was 2 other questions. When is it coming out? And it's going to be trialled in October.
The bushfire resilience rating and the energy efficiency rating is October. Yeah.
And everything else is April, was it? Next year?
I think so, yes.
Yep. Yeah. And the name of the app will be?
It's the multi-hazard resilience rating.
And energy efficiency.
And
it's
energy
a very
efficiency.
easy one.
Colin.
It's a very easy one to remember. Yes.
One last question, I'm told. I think there's an elephant in the room here of cost. So I'm part of a project that's not very far away from here, a recovery program. And what we do is take 10 or 20 people around, look at houses of all different types, ages. Most of them aren't approved. Oh, they're approved, but not to current bushfire protection standards. We find an issue and we discuss how we're going to solve that issue. The homeowner says, what do I do? I say, you bring it up to standard. How much is that going to cost? 50,000. No way, not going to happen. So then we go into a discussion about, well, what can you do that might not be perfect, but will certainly improve your situation? And we do sometimes come up with some great ideas. So I'm interested in the panel's reaction to that approach and how that fits with the rating.
I might go first. And with that, with the system that they've got and what Kylie spoke about yesterday, 0 through to 5, you might want to get to 5, but it's going to be cost prohibitive. And I think I'm reiterating what Kylie said yesterday. You can then go back and you can say, this is what I can afford now. And then when you can afford more, you can go back and you can do a little bit more, which I think is where you're going. And then you can keep going back and edging it to where you want to be. So you don't have to do everything at once. Sorry, David. Yep. Yep.
Just on top of that as well, what the resilience rating aspect can give is a way that governments can look at putting grants and stuff into as well. So if you've got the household resilience program within cyclone regions of Queensland, using the different retrofitting measures to do the upgrades, they can provide grants to lower socioeconomic homeowners to actually help improve those things. And having that performance criteria resilience rating metric is a way of standardising or accelerating that through as well. So it could be a way that grants or other systems can help fund through an evidence-based way of improving the performance or resilience of the home. So it may not just be on homeowners, but it's another path for looking at different funding avenues.
Thanks, David. I'm going to have to leave it there because we've got the next one, but thank the panel. Thank you.